So my name is Chris Holtkamp. I'm an assistant professor of environmental planning at the University of Wisconsin River Falls in River Falls, Wisconsin.
What was your job before you became a professor?
I worked almost 20 years as an urban planner for the Lower Colorado River Authority. And my job was basically to provide urban planning assistance to primarily rural communities who bought water and power from LCRA.
And what were your job duties?
So I would work with communities doing comprehensive plans, and comprehensive plans are kind of long-term, 10 or 20-year plans, laying out kind of a big picture for what the city wants to achieve over the long term. So it kind of sets that long-term guidance for decision making. We also were involved with like downtown revitalization plans. So particularly in these rural communities, they were looking to use their downtown kind of as an economic activity center, both for local residents and for tourists. And so, things like historic preservation, business attraction, those kinds of activities were part of those downtown plans. And then we also did just kind of straight up economic development. So we worked with communities to help them identify desired businesses to try and recruit to attract to their communities to help grow their economy, as well as working to what we call business retention and expansion. So working with existing businesses in the communities to make sure they were successful, and and then also like local entrepreneurship and those kinds of activities.
What did you do on a day-to-day basis? Or does that kind of sum it up, what you just said?
Well, so it kind of depended on what kind of project we were working on. So, like for a comprehensive plan, for example, a typical day may involve planning for and preparing for public engagement. So, we did a lot of community surveys, we did a lot of town hall meetings, interviews, and focus groups. So, that was a lot of time spent talking to people and getting their ideas about what was happening in their communities and issues and challenges they were facing. Other days we did a lot of analysis, data analysis, and data development. So looking at things like population characteristics in communities, figuring out population projections, income, education, all of that sort of data about what the community, the people who live in the community, what their characteristics were, as and that would also kind of inform the decision making process. Some days were just was GIS, right? So if we're going to kind of connect this to geography, obviously GIS is a big part of that. So making maps of the community, land use, current land use in the communities, those kinds of things. So it kind of varied day to day, but a lot of kind of data work and public engagement, stuff like that.
What attributes, skills, and knowledge do you need in order to have this occupation?
I think one of the biggest ones is the ability to look at the big picture. I think what sets sort of urban planners apart from, say, architects or engineers or like straight up economic developers is that urban planners tend to take a broader perspective on issues. So, like, where an engineer would look at a road and say, we're going to plan this road for the most efficient movement of cars, right? That's what they care about. They want to just move cars quickly, and they're going to design the road to facilitate that. An urban planner would look at a road and say, well, we need to take into account the movement of cars, but we also need to think about pedestrians, and we need to think about cyclists, and we need to think about the businesses along that road, and how if we just build this wide street to move cars, what's that going to mean for the businesses who are hoping to get people to stop and shop at their businesses, or create places like sidewalks where people can sit for a cafe and have like outdoor seating, that sort of thing. And that's what planners, I think, have in common with geographers, is that sort of big picture thinking and looking at relationships across different factors, where other professions tend to be more focused on a single topic.
So, to you, what is geography?
To me, geography is about relationships, and primarily the relationship between people and their environment. And so when we think about urban planning, right, cities are the kind of environment most people live in. And so urban planning is basically taking that idea of relationships between our environment and applying it to the built world.
How did geography assist you when you were an urban planner?
One thing it did was it certainly gave me that big picture perspective and looking at relationships across different factors, like I talked about a second ago. Also, obviously, GIS is a big part of urban planning. So having that just that technical skill of geographic information systems is important. And three, I think um, it gave me, that understanding of the physical environment, because obviously when we start to talk about cities, how they are built, where we build things is influenced by the physical environment. So things like floodplains and natural hazards and all of these uh, concepts of geography that we talk about influence how we build cities, where we build cities. And so we need to incorporate those ideas of the physical environment into how we design places to make them more sustainable, make them more resilient and less vulnerable to hazards, that kind of thing.
As a professor of geography,
Mhm.
how do you teach geography in a way to help your students succeed in their job?
I try very hard to make it practical. So what I try and do is as I'm teaching in class, I try and connect everything back to how they might use it in a job. And so everything is very practical and very hands-on. So I have students developing demographic analyses. So they're actually gathering data and understanding, how that data, what that data means. If they look at the population of their hometown and they say, okay, my population is declining and people aren't very well educated and the population is aging, they can start to understand, well, what does that mean for your community, right? What are some challenges that those characteristics may create for you? So I try and make it very practical for them to understand, once you graduate and you get a job, this is what you're going to be doing, and what you're learning here directly connects to that.
Which courses then would you recommend a student to take if they wanted to become an urban planner?
Sure. I would obviously urban geography, if it's offered in your community or in your school. I mean, is a fundamental one. It gives you kind of that theoretical idea of how cities developed, why they developed the way they do, why they look the way they do. A lot of geography programs, even if they don't have a planning, actual planning component, will offer things like transportation geography, and so that would be important. Um, Certainly, any kind of natural hazards course you could take, because natural hazards have an enormous impact on cities and how people live. Economic geography is important to understand, again, how the economy works and how the environment affects the economy and how those things are related. Those are certainly, if you don't have like planning specific courses, those are ones that would certainly be useful for an aspiring urban planner.
Thank you so much, Chris. And
Sure.
that is a wrap on that.